saying the best thing there. Half a minute. Middle of the sentence, finish it. And I am hoping that somebody will be willing to read what you wrote. And so I would like a volunteer. Yes? Okay. Before you do that, let's talk for a second. What I would like everybody to do, and what you need to do as the reader, is to read really loud. Can you do that really loudly? Okay, cool. Now, as listeners, it is very helpful to take notes, because if you don't, you may forget what you heard. So, when you are listening, what might you be listening for? Yeah.
The main characters.
Okay. Okay, what else? cynicism, to know what the person who's listening liked, and where you might have gotten confused, or where your mind might have wandered a little bit. Those are helpful to know, for the writer to know. So those are some things to keep in mind, where the excitement is, what you liked, where you may not have understood. And your job is to read very loudly, and I think the best way to do that is maybe to come and stand in the front. Okay? Cool. Thank you. What's your name? Maida. Okay, go for it.
Once there was a girl and she lived in a house. One day she discovered a door in the den. Then she locked herself in the den and opened a door. All of a sudden, she was in the ocean. Then she looked at her legs. Her legs turned into a tail. Then she closed the door and started swimming. Then she remembered something about her parents. Her mom was a mermaid and her dad was a human. So her dad could turn into a mermaid and her mom could turn into a human. Then she heard splashes. It was her mom. Then she went back through the door. If her mom saw her, she would ground her for a month. But luckily, as soon as she got out of the water, her tail disappeared and her legs came back. Then she unlocked the den and hurried back to her room and pretended to be finishing her chocolate bar. But she actually ate the rest of her chocolate bar. Then she stepped in a pile of ice cream tubs. Then she groaned because she just remembered that a few hours ago she ate 50 tubs of ice cream. Then she squatted back on her bed.
Thank you very much.
She has more, actually.
No, that's all I
Sorry
know.
about that.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, that was quite a bit for 15 minutes. And so, as you give your comments, what to keep in mind? Anything? Yes?
Be nice.
Yeah, yeah. So we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Yeah. And your job, Maida, is just to listen. You are not allowed to explain. Why is Maida not allowed to explain? Yeah, what do you think?
Because what she may think may be different from what someone else thinks.
Yeah, yeah. Why else? Yes.
Because maybe you should have the explanation in the writing.
Exactly, exactly. So it needs to be in the story. You're going to hear what everybody else got from your story. So your job, and Maida, you should get your pencil ready because you may want to write down some of these comments because you may want to revise your story. Okay, so, comments. What did you think? Yes.
Well, I thought that your writing was the perspective of it. I thought I really liked because it sounded like it was from just a normal. Well, her parents are mermaids or mer people, but the perspective was like from an unusual girl, and I liked that.
Great, great. What else? Yes.
I really like how it was really funny, but I was also wondering what was the girl's name?
Okay. Think about that. What else? Anybody else? Yes, Susan.
I'm just wondering if we're all going to go eat ice cream after this event.
If what?
We're all going to go eat ice cream after this event.
So you were interested in the story and wanted to know what came next. Well, that's great. Yes.
I like how she got through the ocean through like a door in the basement and it
Ah.
was like she was on the beach.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
I thought it was kind of cool when she could go to the ocean to
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, wish I could do that. Anything else? Anybody else with a comment? Yes.
I thought it was interesting that she thought if she got caught being a mermaid, that her mother would ground her and be upset. And I'm wondering if there was something that happened before that made her know that that would be what happened.
Yeah, yeah, so you wanted to know more about that. Yeah, great, great. Yeah, I love the 50 tubs of ice cream. And I forgot what it was. I wrote it down that the chocolate bar, and then the ocean was a great surprise. I would have liked to know if she was surprised to see the ocean or if she expected it. Sometimes I would have liked to know about what she's thinking and feeling while these events happen, which are so exciting and surprising. And maybe what it feels like to have your legs turn into a tail. That's got to be an experience. And I don't know if it's a comfortable experience or an uncomfortable one, if it tingles or if it itches. So those kinds of details might be fun. I like that it was the den, so we knew exactly where it was. Cool, thank you. Maybe one more person would like to read. Yes. So get ready. I don't know if anybody wrote, but get ready to write because it's useful. What's your name?
Sarah. Being a table is hard work, especially with the clamants. The baby of the family, Fifi, manages to spit on me in a new creative way every single day. That's right. I am almost always covered with baby snacks, applesauce, or a mysterious spit that seems to consist of various different things. One particular night, Janie, the older sister, had tired of cleaning up her little sister's messes and decided to create a petition. "Mom, Dad," she said, placing her hands neatly on my surface. "Yes," looking up from a phone, Janie's dad, Andrew, bored his eyes into Janie's bright red hair. Janie cleared her throat. "Well, I wonder if you could hear me out and sign my petition about Fifi's spit eyes," she said. Andrew returned his eyes to his phone. "I wonder as well," he murmured. Janie sighed. She never got enough attention from her parents. At least to me it seemed that way. Next she tried her mother, who was named Claire. Mom?" she asked. "Hello?" Claire nodded while holding Fifi, who was having one of her tantrums. "Honey, what is it? You know I'm busy enough with Fifi, and please don't make her yell more," she said over the screams. Janie despairingly nodded, though she didn't understand. I didn't either, and that says a lot, because everyone knows the tables are very wise. Apparently Janie wasn't feeling too good, and she did something that I had never seen her do before. She yelled. She screamed even, at the top of her lungs at her parents.
Okay, comments? Yes.
I kind of got the name of all the characters, so it wasn't like the older sister got very mad and did something I'd never seen her do before. It could tell you the older sister's name.
Yeah, so names are good. Yes.
I liked it how you used a lot of details.
Yes.
And you interpreted them instead of Janie had red hair. You said that the dad looked at her red hair instead of saying she had red hair.
So that was a clever way of bringing it in and letting the reader know. Yes. Yes.
I like how it was the perspective of the table because it's really creative instead of just being like, I don't know, and then Jamie did this instead of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the table was well used in this. Yes.
I like that it was funny.
Me too. Anybody else?
And
Yes?
I really liked how the table displayed the source of Jamie's frustration rather than hearing it from Jamie's perspective.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I like the specificity of spit. And that the table has an opinion about how much attention, is it Jamie or Jamie?
Jamie.
Jamie gets from her mom. So the table, you know, kind of takes sides here. And that was fun. It's a lot of fun. And I loved that the table, according to the table, tables are very wise. And then when Jamie yells, that's kind of an event.
Yeah. I didn't get to finish.
Well, we know that in 15 minutes, so I hope you'll continue. I wonder how it feels if, and you know, I don't know the capabilities of this table. So if the table can feel hot and cold, if the table likes certain sensations, it doesn't like others, that might be fun, add to the fun. And that this is great. Okay, so I'm going to move along, and I want to tell you that if you enjoy this, and it's not nearby, but just saying, I teach in the summers. I live in Brewster, New York, which on the train is about an hour and a half. And I do a writing workshop every Wednesday afternoon for 6 weeks for kids 10 and up. And from the week after, the Wednesday following July 4th for 6 weeks, whatever that works out to. And if you're interested, you need to call the Brewster Public Library and put your name on the list. And you also need to be able to come at least 5 out of the 6 weeks. So it's just something to know that we do a lot of writing, we do a lot of critiquing, I give homework. And I edit like an editor. So if anybody is interested, 1 year I did get a high schooler from Illinois. So you would not be in her league if you came. If you would like to be in touch with me, you can write on my guest book on my website, which is GailCarsonLevine.com. I'm easily found. And if you would like to follow my blog, which is on my website, it is all about writing. So I thought I could read to you a little bit from my new book, Ogre, Enchanted. How many of you have read Ella Enchanted? Oh, cool, cool. How many of you have seen the movie? Okay. And this is a prequel. What is a prequel? Yes?
If the book, if all of the rights for the book is the book after
That would be the sequel. That would be after. So what's the opposite of after? Before. So a prequel is before. Okay, so I'm going to read a little bit from the beginning of Ogre Enchanted. And my mind emptied. The kitchen tiles no longer seemed to be beneath me. Somewhere, fabric ripped. My mind filled again. I held my arms out for balance and felt the floor under my feet. My mouth tasted gamey and spoiled, as if I'd swallowed a 3-day dead squirrel. Wormy's jaw was unhinged. He extended my name. Evie, there's hair on your face. Not what I expected to hear. I started to lift a hand to my cheek, but stopped and held the hand out. Hair sprouted there. My fingernails were long and filthy. My stomach rose into my throat. Evie, you're an ogre. I looked down at further horrors. My bodice had ripped, but my apron strings held and were squeezing my stomach. Hastily, I untied them. The seams of both sleeves of my bodice had split. The hem of my skirt, which had hovered just above the floor, now fell a little below my knees. I had shot up a whole foot. My boots, which were visible now without raising my skirts, had come apart. When I lifted one foot, the sole flapped. My stomach settled, though I didn't know how it could, and it rumbled, but I'd had a big breakfast. How delicious Wormy looked. A little lopsided because he always hiked up his left shoulder, which just added to his appeal, and those rounded cheeks, those plump earlobes, the sweetest part, that flawless neck, that skin, the hue of a goose, roasted to a turn. How healthy I kept him, like a farmer safeguarding her livestock. How dear he was to me. Ah! What was I thinking? So, have any of you read this yet? Oh, cool, wow, okay. So what fairy tale does it remind you of? Yes.
Cinderella, maybe?
Okay, why?
No, wait, that's not Enchanted. It was really.
Yeah, okay. What fairy tale does this one? Yes. Yeah. This is based on a reverse gender Beauty and the Beast story, which is called The False Prince and the True, and you can look it up. And if you look it up and then read this, you might find it interesting to see what I did and what I didn't do. In that one, the beast is not a beast, it's an old lady. But the prince is horrified at the thought of marrying her. And for some reason, I didn't care for that. Anyway, in Beauty, there is something that has always bothered me about Beauty and the Beast, about the story. Is there anything that bothers you about that story? That the story of Beauty and the Beast. How many of you know the story just from Disney? Okay, a confessor. How many of you have read fairy tales from Grimm in there? Oh, cool, wow, great. Okay, so there has always been something that, not always, as an adult, there has been something that bothered me about Beauty and the Beast. And the story is, and Grimm doesn't say, I think Disney does, but Grimm doesn't tell how the beast becomes a beast. He's just a beast. And he can only stop being a beast if somebody is willing to marry him. What is the problem? Beauty shows up. Yeah, what do you think?
That you have to marry him?
Well, that she has to marry him?
No, that of like in order to make him not a beast, you have to marry someone.
He has to marry somebody, yes. Yes, that seems to me like a big problem. Yeah, what else?
Also, she just shows up. It doesn't know how she shows up. Well, it does, but all of them.
Yeah, well, she shows up, and yes.
Like, just because she's a
and she appeared means that he says to marry her.
Yeah, like she just shows up. She happens to be gorgeous. She happens to be very nice. He is never forced to face, what if she wasn't beautiful? I mean, that's not so terrible, but what if she wasn't nice? What if she was just awful? Or what if she was very nice and he didn't like her anyway? Which you have a right to do. Then he has to make a choice between staying the beast forever or marrying, or persuading her to marry him, which she might do, because for what other reason might she marry him? Yeah.
Because he lives in a huge castle.
Yes, yes. He's apparently very wealthy. And he has all these servants. Yeah. So her motives might not be very pure. This marriage might not work out too well. He might wish she was a beast again. So that's a lot of what I was thinking about when I wrote this, was what kind of self-respect do you have when you're a beast and you don't have a lot of choices about what your fate is going to be. So, now I'm hoping you will have questions for me about writing, about my books, about anything. Yes?
What was your first book that you wrote?
The first book I wrote was called The King's Cure. It was an art appreciation book for kids. I did pencil drawings of birds, and I used reproductions of famous artwork. It was about a bird who's very sick, the king of the birds, an eagle. And he's told by his physicians that he'll only get well if he sees something beautiful. And so he's brought to see all these beautiful works of art, but he doesn't see the beauty. And nobody would publish it. And they wouldn't publish it because the story was very simple. But I worked in discussion of art that was pretty advanced, and it didn't meet in the middle. So for the art, you would have had to be 12, and for the story, you would have had to be 6. So, so then I started to learn about writing for kids, and I took a class, and a classmate is in the back here, Sherry, and we were in a class together. I took other classes. I read books about writing. I read all the Newbery books in the library. And it took me 9 years to get a book published. And my first published book was Ella Enchanted. So for 9 years, every publisher, because I sent them out, every publisher in the known universe rejected my stories. Yes?
So Dave at Night, one of your books, I think, it inspired me to read chapter books more, and because in 3rd grade I didn't really like chapter books. What inspired you for like the topic?
Dave at Night is a historical novel. I have another historical novel coming out in the spring of 2020. And both of them were inspired by my father's life. Dave at Night takes place in 1926, and Dave lives in an orphanage. My father was an orphan and grew up in the Hebrew Orphan Asylum. And that had boys and girls in it, but I made it just boys to make it simpler. It's the Hebrew Home for Boys, which they have other names for, like the Hell House for Boys. And it was, the real orphanage was very close to Harlem. Today it would be Harlem. And in the 1920s was the Harlem Renaissance. And so the boys slip out, not the boys, Dave slips out of the orphanage at night and has adventures in the Harlem Renaissance. And the orphanage was very difficult. The superintendent was horrible. And that was the case. That was the truth. But my father would not talk about his childhood. Anybody want to guess why he wouldn't talk about it? Yeah, what do you think?
Maybe it made him a bit upset. Maybe it made him upset and he didn't want to live in the past. He wanted to live in the present.
I think that's true. I think my father had a very tough childhood. But he came out a very happy man. My father was the most joyous person I've ever known. So I wrote a book to understand after he died. He died when I was 38. And I wrote Dave at Night to understand how he turned out okay. And after you read it, do you think you understand that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Good.
It makes a lot of sense to think back on it. How he would sneak out in the night.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that. And hearing that you became more of a reader because of one of my books, that is the best compliment that a writer ever gets. A kid's book writer. If an adult says that, it gets a little strange. But more questions. Susan Vincent.
Well, you mentioned you have a book coming out in 2020, so can you tell us anything more about it other than that it's historical?
My father was a Sephardic Jew. Does anybody know what that means, to be a Sephardic Jew? It means to be a Jew. Do you know that? Do you know?
I think it's a Jew from Asia.
There are Jews from Asia, but I don't think that they're considered Sephardic unless their ancestors came from Spain or Portugal. It's Jews whose ancestors came from Spain or Portugal, as my father's did. And in 1492, what happened in 1492? Yes? Yes. So I start this book with a poem. Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. You all know that. And in the self-same year, it's true, Spain's king and queen expelled the Jew. In 1492, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabel threw all the Jews out of Spain. And my ancestors were among them. And so I wrote a book about a girl who's in a very prominent family, and her grandfather loves her very much. And he takes her with him when he travels throughout Spain, and she sees a lot of the things that happen that lead to the expulsion of the Jews. And it starts when she's 7, and it ends when she's 16, when they are expelled. And I feel, and I started to feel as I was writing it, that I was writing my ancestor. This was a very terrible thing that happened. So it's a 3-hanky book. If you don't like a sad book, it's not for you. It's my really only 3-hanky book. It's not all sad, but there's a lot of sadness in it.
Does it have a title yet?
My editor hates my title. So the title, my main character is Seema. I called it Long Ago Seema, and she hated it. So if you think of a title as you're sitting there, let me know. I've proposed some, and I'm waiting to hear. Yes?
How long does it normally take you to write a book?
Well, it depends on the book. So I wrote, does anybody know my Princess Tales? Yes. So the first one, The Fairy's Mistake, was based on a picture book that was one of those rejected books that nobody would take. And then when Ella was published, my editor asked me to expand it into a chapter book and write 2 more. And then she asked me to write 3 more after that. But when I wrote that and expanded it into a chapter book, that took 8 days. So that is my record. That is the shortest. And the longest, my mystery, Stolen Magic, took me 4.5 years. I was lost. I was miserable. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to find my way out of the story. And I eventually got it. But it's not the same story I started with. I got so lost. I think average 1.5 years to 2. Do you have a follow-up question?
It was about the,
Hang on. Yes.
it's not really a follow-up.
Okay, well, ask.
My question is, I think you probably get this question a lot, but what inspired you to start writing?
What inspired me to start writing is all the books I read as a kid. I love to read. I was the kind of kid who walked down the street reading and fell off the curb. I shared a bedroom with my sister. Does anybody here share a bedroom with a sibling? If you do, how many of you think you have enough privacy? Okay, well, I didn't. And if you feel you have enough privacy, that means that your sister is wonderful and you're a wonderful sister. My sister hated me, and I would read because a book is the most private place in the universe. And I would read in the bathroom. And that was a problem for everybody else because we had one. But how many of you, when you read a book and you like it, reread it? Okay, I think not all writers do that. But if you do, the language tends to get inside you and become part of you as a writer. So I did that. I reread books a lot. And I think that's what helped me become a writer. I didn't expect to be a writer. I never met a writer when I was a kid. I didn't meet a writer until I started to become one. Yes?
So, I have a question about the book that's coming out that you didn't read it. What were some of the events that you mentioned there?
Well, at the time, Spain was not entirely a Christian country. It was, southern Spain was Muslim, but the Christians were bent on conquering all of Spain. And in 1487, they conquered Malaga. And they didn't do this all the time. But what they did when they conquered Malaga was the Muslims that they conquered were all sold into slavery. And the Jews were all held until all the other Jews, the Jews in Christian Spain, paid for them to get released. And my character witnesses before Malaga, I'm going to give you all 9 years. Before Malaga fell, there was a siege, and they had very little to eat. So these people were starving. My main character sees all these starving people and feels terrible about what's going to happen to them, and is happy that the Jews at least will be freed once their ransom is paid. And the book doesn't go into this much, but in actual history, it took 4 years to get all the money together. So they were kind of imprisoned. They were fed, but they were imprisoned for 4 years, and they probably were not that different from slaves. They probably had to work. So that's an example of bad things. At the very beginning of the book, the town, the city that they live in, is hit with the plague. What's the plague? Yes.
It was the sickness that was carried from Asia by rats to Europe.
Excellent. That is an excellent answer. Although I read a recent article in National Geographic that put forth the theory that that plague, the medieval plague, was not carried by rats. What you just said is what's mostly believed. So your information is very good. But the reason that I'm saying that, and it's important, is because right at the beginning of the book, plague strikes this town. And my main character is very sick, but she recovers. And her family is hit. But interestingly, Jews got plague less than Christians. Does anybody want to guess why that might have been the case? Yeah, what do you think it might have been?
Maybe they're from somewhere, like they came from somewhere, and they had a little bit more like immunity to the plague, like maybe were a little more familiar with it. So.
Oh, that's a really interesting idea. I'm not sure that would be true, but that's very scientific. Yeah. Another guess. Yeah.
Someone heard that since they're treated really badly,
Mm.
so and they probably get sick a lot, and then when they attend them, they probably have a stronger immune system.
Stronger immune system because they had such miserable lives. That's great. Okay. What do you think?
This is just a guess, but maybe it had to do with that some of them were kosher.
Well, kosher. That's interesting. That could be. I don't know. That's an interesting. Kosher is dietary rules that were different. Yes. What do you think?
I think maybe the DNA was slightly different, and also maybe since the Christians had a lot more to eat, maybe something in the food, and the Jews got different food or the scraps, and didn't have as much food to get sickness from.
These are very scientific, interesting ideas. What is generally thought may have been the case is that Jews lived in ghettos, lived together. And so, along with this National Geographic idea that the medieval plague may have been spread by breath in air, they weren't coming into contact with Christians quite as much. That's one theory. And the other theory is that Jewish ritual involved a lot more washing, hand washing, and body washing. And so there probably was less spread of germs. But in the Middle Ages, did anybody know anything about germs? No. So what they decided, because they didn't like the Jews much, and when they saw the difference that Christians were getting plagued more, they decided, and there's a certain logic to it, they decided that Jews were poisoning the wells. And there would be riots, and Jews would be treated very badly then. So that would be another example. That happens at the beginning of the book. We see that. Any more questions? Yes? David Knight is one of my favorites of my books that I've written. Writing Magic, which is my book for kids about writing, is another favorite. Writer to Writer is the second book about writing for kids, and I like it a lot. But Writing Magic, because it's the one I wrote first. My book Lost Kingdom of Bamar, which is the prequel to Two Princes of Bamar, I love. And the new book. And the new book, I had to learn so much about, I didn't know any of this. What I just told you 3 years ago, I didn't know. I had to learn so much that I'm really proud of writing that book. So that's another favorite. Yes.
Well, you said that that's possibly your only sad book, but I was thinking that I also think that The Two Princesses of Vermont is also slightly sad at the end.
Yeah, it's a bittersweet ending. And a girl wrote to me, so upset. She wrote to me that I had to write a sequel and fix it. Or I had to go back and I had to change it. There had to be a revised edition with a different ending. So, and you know, there's sadness in a lot of my books. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And in writing magic, one of the things I say is that a writer's job is to make his or her characters suffer. And the reason is we want our readers to suffer. Why do we want our readers to suffer? Yes. They'll be happy at the end, yes. And why else is good to make the reader suffer? Yes.
Then you know what a great book if you made the reader feel something, then you know that they really comprehended it, and then you made people feel feelings rather than just they read the book and they liked the book.
Yes, yes, great. What else? Yes.
Because it makes them feel more engaged.
Yeah, because they'll be engaged. They'll keep turning pages to be put out of their misery. Yes.
Because people want to know what happens, and usually they want the suffering to end, so it makes them wonder if it ends continuing.
Yeah, yeah. So that's my job, to make it miserable. And that's why expelling the Jews from Spain was probably made for writers. I saw, yes, Randy.
So I had a question. You mentioned before that your editor hated the title, so I just wanted to ask a little bit about what it's like to work with an editor, someone who's telling you the things they like or don't like about your work, how you take that feedback, and what do you do with it? Because I know a lot of kids are working on their writing in school, and their teachers might give them feedback. So how do you manage working with an editor?
Well, I love my editor. And our goals are to have the best book possible. So I take her edits very seriously. Often, my first response is, can I do this? Sometimes I disagree. And when I disagree, it's up to me. It's my book. Which is different from being in school, having a teacher where you have to do it. But it's my book, and when a reviewer doesn't like something, I can't say, well, the editor made me do it. It's my book. My book, Stolen Magic, the one that took 32 years, 4.5 years to write, my editor wrote me trying to remember, I think it was a 32-page, single-spaced editorial letter about everything that was wrong with that book. And one of her lines, which made me cry, was, how on earth do you expect the reader to understand da-da-da, whatever it was? And for that one, I called her up and said that really hurt me. But I went through, and I go through, and I love to revise. So that I love to revise is one of the charming aspects of it. And I also love, at that point, it becomes a conversation between me and the editor. And I love that. And also, when an editor, and if you were to come to my workshop in Brewster, you'll have that experience. And you had it a little bit tonight. When you show work, and when somebody looks at your work and gives you a response, you are getting attention in a very fulfilling way. It's very complete. I do my best to really get inside what a student is writing. And I think, and that's a kind of gratification that I get working with an editor. And she sends me an editorial letter and she marks up a manuscript. Not every editor works that way. Some editors will talk to the writer. I don't want that. I want to see on the page where the problem is. An editor, not my current editor, but an editor once told me my character wasn't my main character wasn't likable. And I didn't understand. And I needed her to go into the manuscript to show me the moments when she wasn't likable, so I could see it and I could fix it. And once she did that, I did see it, and I was able to know what was going on. I've had problems with likability more than once. But since I did bring this, I might as well show you something. Come on up. What's going on here? I brought a Ogre Enchanted copy edited. And this is what it looks like. That's not a good example. Let's find a better example. Okay, this is the copy editor, which is different from my editor. Does anybody know what a copy editor does? Copy editor, yes. What do you think?
Is it someone who works more on the publishing side, not the publisher, but works with the publisher?
The copy editor, both my editor and the copy editor work for the publisher. The copy editor is the person who's, my editor is, she does some copy editing too, but she looks at the big picture and will tell me, like on the expulsion book, she's already told me that I have to trim a lot from the first 200 pages. It's a very long book, and I sent it to her after I trimmed 150 pages already. But she said the first 200 have to move faster. So she'll tell me big stuff like that. The copy editor is gonna make sure that the time works right. That if I say something happened in 1488, and then I say a year went by, and then I say it's 1490, she's going to notice, no, there's a discrepancy there. It's like the nitty-gritty, or may change punctuation, may disagree with me about usage, which is how a word is used, which I have arguments about all the time because I love English usage and I'm usually right. But that's what it looks like. It's a Word document, they write comments, I respond, I fix, I change, and we go back and forth. And we go back and forth a few times before, well, with my editor, we go back and forth, depending on the kind of shape the book is in when she gets it, maybe 3 or 4 times. And then with the copy editor, maybe twice. And then things move along. And then I start to see it in galleys when it's got the typeface, when it looks like it's going to appear on the page. And then it's published. And I read it to children and I see things that I wish I could change. Always. Yes?
When it took the 9 years for you to be published, how did you kind of persevere through that and keep going? Because I imagine a lot of writers starting out have that same experience.
Yeah, except the ones we hate. We get published right out of the gate.
We won't think about that.
Actually, that was one of the happiest times of my life. I joined the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators I started going to conferences. I joined critique groups. I was in this class that Sherry and I were in together. And we were all in the same boat. We were all getting rejected all the time. And so I was making friends, which was one of the joys of life, and feeling a lot of support. I mean, at one point, near the end of the 9 years, it dawned on me that if I had set out to be a brain surgeon, I would have been one. And then I met a doctor who was giving up his practice to try to be a children's book writer. And I thought, but I love learning the skill. I love revising. I love getting better at it. So it was all that was very supportive that got me through. I wasn't in a garret just sending out stuff and getting rejected. Yes.
I'm curious what your process is day to day. Like, where do you write and what time of day and what's your environment when you write?
I write in the kitchen, standing up because I've read that standing is more healthy than sitting, and also because I pulled my hamstring a few years ago, so if I sit for a long time, it hurts. The dog scratches at the door, I let the dog in. Give the dog a biscuit to go out with again. But what I do, and I start working in the morning. I get sleepy after lunch. I'm not so good right after lunch. Later in the day, I get back into it. I set myself a goal of at least 2.25 hours a day. And I write down, I started at 8:13. If I go to the bathroom, I write down that I stopped writing at 8:28. And then when I come back, I say 8:32. And I keep a running total. And I am incapable of ignoring an email, so if an email comes in, I write when I stopped, I look at the email, I may respond to it, I go back, I write the time. It's very broken up. And yet, I'm able to do that. I can't do two things at once, but I can do one very choppily. I write anywhere. I can write on the train. I can write in an airport. I take my laptop with me. I don't need the moon to be in a certain position. I don't need dead silence. So that's how I do it. Yes?
Just curious, how did the success of your book and then Ella Enchanted and then turning it into a movie, how did that change your, I guess, your career and your life?
Well, it was the Newbery Honor that really changed my life. And it's the reason you're all here, that it's hard to get to be known. And if a book doesn't get a lot of word of mouth or doesn't, there are things that happen to books that get them readers. Because your first book, for all of you future writers, will appear in the bookstore for a very brief period. And if something doesn't happen, it will sink into oblivion. And then if you're lucky, you'll write another book, and you may start to very slowly get readers. But if something, I got very lucky. And I say I got very lucky because, yes, I wrote a good book, but I got lucky because there are a lot of good books. And this particular Newbery Committee with these particular members like mine. So the Newbery Honor, and that made it possible for me to have a life as a writer, for which I am, endlessly grateful and feel, like I frequently have to pinch myself, and it's 20 years later and it's still true. So, yes.
What do you think about the movie that was adapted from your book? Do did you at first not like it and then like it, and what do you think you would have changed if you would have been?
Oh, I wouldn't have had a talking snake and an evil uncle. That's what I would have changed right off the bat. But I'm very glad the movie was made because it continues to bring readers to the book. And I like the movie, it's fun, and my husband and I got to go to Ireland and watch a couple of days of the shooting, which was fascinating, and see that there was a parking lot full of cars, and there was really only me who wrote the book with one car. And I got to meet Anne Hathaway, and I'll show you a picture, but before I do, I have to warn you, they are very, 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 is it coming up? Yes, tall. So I'm glad, and I think it's a fun movie, and I think Anne Hathaway was a fabulous Ella. So that's what I think, yes? So you think? You do too?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Is the actor what you pictured Ella looking like in your mind when you wrote?
Yeah, she's pretty close. Char, I made dark skinned, and they didn't do that. But Anne does look a lot like what I had in mind. Okay, one more question if there is one. Going. Okay, well, thank you so much for
So we are going to have Miss Levine here signing books, and they are still going to be for sale outside